Welcome to Justice. Hey, Shy, how you doing?
Hey, girl, hey.
We are back for another episode, and we're so excited to be here. How are you feeling today?
I am feeling well-rested and also really excited to go into the weekend. I'm going to do a lot of self-care. What
That's
about
beautiful. I am feeling really excited to go into my weekend too. I'm hosting a lot of people this weekend, so it probably won't be restful,
you?
but it'll be fun.
Oh, joyful. Okay.
Yes.
Yes.
So, can you tell us a little bit about our amazing sponsor today?
Absolutely. So today's episode is sponsored by the kind people over at Penny Post. And Margo, you remember Penny Post because it is my Narnia, I like to say.
Well, you introduced me into the joys of journaling through Penny Post.
Absolutely. And so they are an amazing stationery greeting card planner boutique. They have both a physical location in Old Town Alexandria, but also a very robust website. And they are for the stationery and planner lovers in our lives. And so we're so excited to have them sponsoring today's episode because we love a good old note card, don't we?
We do. And receiving something in the mail just from someone you love.
Absolutely.
Okay. We're getting to our dumb shit men say part of our episode. It's my turn to read this quote, which I've practiced many times and putting on my stage face, which I used to have quite a strong one. So this is a quote by an aspiring Republican senator from the adjacent state of New Hampshire, Bolduc.
Mm-hmm.
Guess what, he says. We have furries and fuzzies in classrooms. They lick themselves, their cats. When they don't like something, they hiss. People walk down the hallway and jump out, he said, as a hissing sound could be heard. And get this, he continued. They're putting litter boxes, right? Litter boxes for that. These are the same people that are concerned about spreading germs. Yet they let children lick themselves and then touch everything. And they're starting to lick each other.
What the entire fuck is he talking about? I don't know. Mark, what is he? But tell me what he's talking about.
He's talking about children who don't identify as their assigned gender.
This is how he is describing trans children?
It's about trans children. It's about identity. It's about identity politics. It's about permissiveness around self-presentation. I really can't fully understand, Tashira, kind of like the depths of where this is coming from, but it is ludicrous. And in fact, it's so ludicrous that the school he was visiting when he was making this erroneous statement put out a statement attesting to the fact that their children in their school don't lick each other and don't
use
in
litter boxes. Okay, so what is this about their cats and their hissing? So should I replace cat with trans?
I don't really know.
Is there any sense in this?
I think this is like a demonization of children and creativity and presentation. You know, I think there's this idea that children are self-presenting in different ways, potentially, maybe not at all related to their gender. And in fact, probably not at all related to their gender or their gender identity, but maybe dressing up. Maybe it was Halloween.
Yeah, or maybe is he talking about the furries that we talked about in the sex and pleasure and dating episode? That's what I initially thought he was talking about.
I think there's some like furry adjacency potentially.
Okay.
I don't really know. Honestly, I don't know. This is a quote I found that did not give a lot of thorough context because it makes no sense.
The thing. If we have to work this hard to make sense of it, it's because it is nonsensical.
Let's say it's about furries. Let's say it's about gender identity. Let's say it's about trans kids. Let's say it's about permissiveness in schools. Let's say it's about behavior. Let's say it's about pleasure. Who the fuck cares if kids are coming to school dressed as cats? And
to hear that have to come out of your mouth. Clearly, who the fuck cares? But look at like the veiled attack also on people who were concerned about the spread of COVID, and that
Yes.
he throws that in at the same time.
These are the people that were concerned about a pandemic.
About the decimation of the human population, a major plague. They were concerned about that.
And you know what? They wanted us to wear masks.
Right. And now look at them spreading germs, licking each other.
And dressing like cats.
And dressing like the amount of dis and misinformation that is happening right now. It's like he just that game Whack 'em? He's like, let me just whack every single talking point that is going to resonate with someone.
Just instill fear. Fear of the unknown. Fear of your children being gay, being trans, being sexual, being...
Using a litter box.
Being creative, dressing different. Oh my God, they dyed their hair. Like...
This shit is wild, dog.
Okay.
All right. Well,
that's today.
So he is an inspiring politician. Who knows where things will be by the time this episode airs. Lots to talk about with voting, etc. But you all please leave us a comment and let us know what you think this means and whether or not.
And are we off base? We could be off base.
We could be off base because they could be passing out litter boxes at elementary schools across America and we just don't know. So there's that. So the podcast now is coming to a close of its first season. We have gotten so much positive feedback, which we are very grateful for, including your reviews on platforms. So please continue to do that. Stay tuned for everything we have coming up in 2023. We're going to have retreats, book clubs, a private community. There's lots coming because for us, Margo, we really want this to be a home base for people who think similarly and who are committed to the ideals and values that we share.
Yeah, and one thing that has become really clear to Tashira and myself really quickly is that we're starting conversations about a lot of topics that are happening in the dark or maybe not happening, or people might not feel like they have access to talk about. And a lot of people want to keep talking. And we want to keep talking about them. We're not experts necessarily. We're only experts in our own experiences. And we want to provide that. And so please stay tuned and please let us know in the comments as well how you see that best happening.
Absolutely. So let's jump into today's topic.
So one of the things so today's topic is the concept and the reality that we all, at all times, hold joy and grief together. But we have experienced, I think, in the last few years, the intensity of this season of life having some very intense moments of joy and some incredibly blowing moments of grief. And we believe that this is going to be a theme for a lot of our listeners, particularly those of the geriatric millennial or older generation with aging parents and grandparents. As we get older, there are more things that are happening. We're entering a time in history that is very, very challenging. And we're also entering big age.
Yeah.
Which I think we all are in agreement has opportunities for some incredible moments of joy, self-knowledge, and understanding about our own happiness and pleasure.
Yeah. So I guess the first question is, how do we hold both? I mean, just understanding these concepts that seem to be so diametrically opposed, like understanding that at a big age, we're more likely to probably, be at a great point in our careers, have a little bit more disposable income than we may have had when we were younger, but also could be experiencing the loss of very close family members as they age as well, just as one of many examples that we'll get into today. What is your outlook on how we even enter this season being able to recognize both simultaneously?
So I can only speak from my own experiences and the way that it's transpired for me in a season where I undoubtedly have experienced the highest highs of my entire life and the deepest lows of my entire life within the last month even, is that if I can't share both, I feel a real sense of being adrift. And so I think that's a really hard thing for a lot of people to hold. I think sadness, grief, fear is hard for a lot of people to talk about, to connect on. And I have found that when I'm aware that I can't share what's going on or even bring it, like it's in my soul, that I can't be.
I can't be. I can't be.
What about
Yes.
you?
Well, I think that I like this idea of I can't be, because to experience both is just part of the human condition. And sometimes I think, we project labels on particular experiences, to the point that if I was looking back at certain things that happened in my life that I thought was the worst thing that could have ever happened to me, let's say 10, 15, 20 years ago, today I'm grateful that that thing happened. So then it makes me question in real time, is this season really one that is fraught with so much pain? Or is it the perception that I have of these life occurrences that sometimes are very natural, right? That's an individual question for me to answer. There are things I'm sure that objectively we would all admit are hard experiences, but there are other
No,
things that may be for the fucking best. Let's just be honest. And this is why I thought of this kind of affirmation, I would say often, Margo, when I was going through hysterectomy and then the breast cancer. It was that we give praise through pain. We give praise through praise. First of all, we give praise through pain because we're present to even experience the pain. So a lot of people didn't make it. But number two, we give praise because it is a belief that we will get to the other side of it.
So there's another part that I resonate so deeply with that. And there's something about pain, both physical pain and emotional pain or loss, that makes everything else really clear. And I felt that through my surgeries last year, but also my dad recently had a terrible accident. And it's just been so clear to me and my family in these moments of doubt about his survival and his wellness, what's important. And that's such a gift through that pain. And so there's just this clarity of, even like on the day to day, like, what should I do today? Obviously, I should visit my dad. Like, there's no question. There's no, or obviously I need to be well to support my family. And that's a gift because we're not feeling that conflict of like, should I do this? Should I do this? I should work. I should do it. It's like, no, I have this opportunity to be present for my family in this way. There's no question.
Yes, and I agree with your point, Margo, because one of the things that just came to me as you were talking about being present for family is the way in which community showed up for me during my treatment. And I've always thought to myself that that moment in life was so eye-opening for me because it made me realize how loved I am. And I would not hope that anyone has to go through a long-term or potentially terminal illness to get to that point, but for whatever reason I did. And to see people send me note cards and to show up and to cook for me and just hold my hand sometimes and make me laugh and go to treatment with me. I felt such an immeasurable amount of love during this time of, physical turmoil that makes me think if I had to get cancer all over again to experience that kind of love, I don't know that I would turn away from it because there has not been a period in my life that has been so eye-opening and affirming.
I feel that too. And I experienced similar experiences, particularly after my double mastectomy. You talking reminded me of a conversation I had with my dearest friend, Amelia, right after, like 2 weeks after my surgery. And she was sitting on my couch and she was like holding my hand, or we were watching TV or doing whatever we did. And I said to her, I kind of hope this doesn't end. And she was like, what do you mean? And I was like, it just feels like this moment, similar to what I said earlier, it's so clear how many people I have in my life that I love and who love me. And I don't always feel that way. And I shouldn't have needed, I didn't why did I need this or something like,
Yeah.
and what if it goes away?
What if it does?
You know, and because so many people were checking in and it was like this amazing moment. And I think you identified this for me is that it's hard for me to accept help. I'm like a much more natural caretaker myself. But like once I allowed myself to receive it, it felt really beautiful.
Yeah. So you know what I do now, and I probably shouldn't be outing myself. I just call Josh. I'm like, I'm not dealing with Margo today.
About what?
If there is a
You
way,
do?
if there is a way,
I'm kind of offended.
well, listen, you have things to work on as we all do. If I need to check on you, if I need to stand in an intersection, if I need to get in a car and drive up, catch a plane, train, automobile, I need to know that. And I cannot trust that you're going to be transparent. And if I need to catch planes, automobiles, I need to know.
You call him?
I text him, I call him, I email him.
Does he respond?
I send carrier pigeons. We have a great relationship that's actually outside of you that you didn't know anything about. So there's that. Yeah.
Well, that's really interesting. I thank you.
You're
I mean, I don't need that, but thanks.
Exactly. And scene.
Okay. Well, what else? I mean, I think one of the things that people really look to you and aspire to be in proximity to you is because you embody a lot of boldness and fearlessness and joy that is not alive in other people's lives. And that wasn't always the case.
It was not. And so I have to like kind of situate that on a journey for me that post and I've talked to you all before on the podcast, to Margo, obviously, about being in an abusive relationship. And post that time period in my life, Margo knows I'm like a fixer, right? I get my PhD in things. And so this PhD period of my life, small PhD, obviously, not big PhD, was me dedicating myself to personal growth and development. And so it looked like a lot of therapy. It looked like trying out different religious practices.
Different modalities, like there was journaling, there was reading, there was meditation.
There were sister circles, right? There was some travel. There was a very intentional dedication to self and growth. And I also think I wanted to understand why I had been in that situation, right? What led me to that point and how I could trust myself not to be there again. And so
I actually found, I do make, so you call Josh, I do make fun of your PhD and lack of, chill.
Overall?
Well, I mean, it's like hard, it's like, okay, what are we doing now? What are we doing now? What are we doing now? Right? Like, where are we going to eat? Where are we going to shop? It's like, why don't we just stroll? And you're like, why would we do that?
Why would we do that?
Right?
Yeah.
And I mean, I also have similar inclinations to you, though. I think in travel, so chill. But in this moment, as a friend, it was really eye-opening for me to see your dedication to self and not looking outward. I think there's a lot of opportunity to look outward, particularly in this kind of cis heteronormative space that you were in.
Yeah.
To be like, oh, I want to like start dating again, or like this person was bad, I'm going to find someone good. And you didn't do that. You were like, I'm not dating for a while. I'm going to explore myself. I'm going to find out what makes me happy. I've never done that.
Exactly. And it was that dedication to joy that I think then reverberated throughout these other seasons that have happened that we've talked about, right? And so getting really clear on my happiness, and I don't mean this in like a very woo-woo superficial way, although we know how I feel about Gabby Bernstein, okay?
We might be going to
we might be going to go see Gabby Bernstein. So beyond that, what I really meant was, how can I understand myself better? How can I center self-care in a real way? And how can I enter a next phase and season of life that is going to pay great dividends? And so by the time I get this news around the hysterectomy, by the time I get this cancer diagnosis and I make other decisions from there, it was almost like a well-flexed muscle.
I feel that so deeply.
Tell me why.
I mean, in similar and different ways, the last 2 years have also involved a lot of self-reflection on my part. And in advance of my diagnosis, right, I was reading a lot. I was thinking about a career change. I was meditating. I was trying to figure out why I was so fucking tired all the time.
Yeah, yeah.
And when my dad was diagnosed, it felt like the depths. I couldn't imagine a sadness deeper or fear more, like a deeper fear than losing my father. And then when had got my diagnosis, it felt so like almost like easy, right? It felt like an opportunity to not have to walk through what my dad was going through. And then with my dad's recent traumatic incident, even in the depths of the worst moments, I knew I just like the muscle was there.
The muscle was there. And so I like to say that it's almost like pouring into a savings account, right? Your rainy day fund. You don't touch it unless you need it, but you break it when that emergency comes.
And you can, that's such a good way of describing it, right? Because in moments of trauma or grief or intensity, you might not be able to put in, but because you've already put in. And so I remember a couple weeks ago, I snuck away between visits with my dad, and he wasn't in state, and I had come home for a few days to see my kids, and I like during the day like was able to go to a yoga class at my studio that I love and kind of held me in so many ways during my journey last year, and just being there with my friends. And I hadn't seen them for a long time. I hadn't been practicing consistently.
Yep.
I hadn't slept in days, right? I hadn't been eating particularly well, but just being there and being able to, that moment, that 1 hour and a half, felt so nourishing because there was already like money in the bank.
Yeah.
I don't know if that resonates.
I think so. Absolutely. There was already money in the bank. You knew where to go to find your joy. And I think this is why it is so important for us outside of those moments of crisis and trauma to kind of do the work. Because unfortunately, when we're there, when we're in the thick of things, it can be so tough to see your way out of it to find the joy, right?
And there's only one truth that we're all going to experience.
Life and death?
Yeah.
For sure.
We're all going to die.
For sure.
I mean, if we're here, we're alive.
And we've all been slowly dying since the time we were born.
Right.
Right.
But we're all going to die, and our loved ones are all going to die.
Don't remind me, because girl, when that day happens to my grandma Maybird, Margo, get another casket. Bury me with her. I'm not going to be no good. I'm not going to be here. I'm not going to experience. Talk about grief. And I don't even know. I mean, I think I have to start doing the self-care work even to a greater degree. Because when I think about the people in my life who I am the closest with, like my grandparents who are 78 and soon to be 81, what the fuck? You want me to live on this planet, on this earth, without my grandmama? Girl, please. Wrap this thing up. I'm out this bitch. Very, very difficult.
Very difficult and really important. Right. Absolutely. These are like conversations that we don't, want to have. And I, had it, not obviously we all have different experiences. I had an incredibly close relationship with my maternal grandmother as well.
Yeah.
So close, spent summers with her. I saw her every week for my entire life. My youngest daughter is named after her. I mean, there's just so much about my existence that I can thank to my gam and my baba, but he passed when I was in college. And I remember never being able to like conceptualize a world without her.
Yeah.
And I know my mom and uncles felt the same way. And yet there is.
I'm already crying just thinking about it.
But that's good. I mean, that like, I remember, when we cry and we grieve, it like shows how strong our love is, right? Like the grief that we feel or the fear that we feel for the grief that we'll feel is an indication of how big our
Our love is.
our connection,
So
right?
that goes
Like,
back to this duality.
right. It's like the bigger the joy, the bigger the love, the bigger the hug, the bigger the loss.
Mm,
And like, we don't want to live a life where we're like holding back.
absolutely.
Right. Because you could live a life where you're like, I'm not going to make connections. I'm not going to get close to people. I'm just going to like keep this protective wall around myself. So when stuff happens, it's not going to hurt as bad.
But then have you even experienced life?
That's what I'm saying.
Is the question. Whew, for those of you all who are listening and not watching, just know that we've had to bring out the Kleenex or the puffs, the tissue. This is probably going to be an emotional one. Because to your point about having these highs and lows and to experience love to the highest, maybe also to experience loss at the highest, is that, I went through a breakup last year into this year that has been very, very painful to navigate, especially ending a long-term relationship. And I think for us at a big age, you probably have all of these ideas around what it means to be our age, to be partnered, to have children if you want them, to have a family in a particular type of way. And when you look up one day and you don't have that, it can be completely earth-shattering. And I know, at least for me, not, delving too much into my circumstances, I thought we were fine until we weren't. And so there wasn't like this slow burn. It was like literally crashing into a wall with a lack of preparation for the grief that was to come. And it happened at a time, Margot, where I was also excelling in so many ways with my brand. I had fought so long to take politics and fashion from a hobby to a career. I was there. I was a full-time solopreneur. My numbers are growing across platforms. I'm making great money. And then my fucking relationship ends. And it's like, how does this happen simultaneously? And I kept saying to you through the grieving process of the end of my relationship is that I was afraid to truly let go and to feel because I thought everything was going to fall apart.
That was actually, the saddest part as a bystander to your grief. It wasn't the grief about the loss of the relationship, which made, of course, sense. I
Yeah.
think, I was grieving that, obviously not as much as you, but I was grieving that too. I have a lot of love for your ex-partner and was quite close to her through the years, and a grief for you and her and your plans and your future. But as a friend, seeing kind of the depths of your self-doubt, where you had fought, like we talked about, you had put so much money in the bank.
Oh.
And, we don't see ourselves as others see us. I think you saying, like, you call Josh when you don't know if I'm telling you the truth. Like, that's interesting because, right, like, you see me differently than I see myself. Like, I'm like, I don't need help. And you're like, Margot's falling apart. She probably needs help. And I just didn't see at all what you were seeing. Like, I didn't, it was like, how are you feeling this self-doubt when you have it? Like, shit happens.
Yeah.
And no one expects anyone, particularly, like, no, the fact that you felt this need to be perfect in this way,
Yeah.
or it was going to all collapse, made me really sad.
I wouldn't even tell my family because of
No,
that.
I
remember you told me I had to tell people.
Well, I because you were again like navigating this grief without your community.
Yeah.
That would have been there for you if you had let them in.
Yeah.
No one knew.
No, and I think, to this idea of falling apart, this is why it is so important for us to allow ourselves to just have all the fucking feels, right? Because there has to be a normalization of just sadness.
And it's okay.
It is okay just to be sad.
It's like to sit in your grief and be a bubbling mess. There's nothing wrong with it. It's real. It's raw. It's like, when did we get the message that like grieving a loss or grieving someone or a relationship was not the appropriate response.
Well, you know what it is. And I see this a lot in the Black community, especially. We'll be quick to tell a child, don't cry, stop crying. Why you crying? Sit up, stand up. Ain't nothing wrong with you. You fine. That didn't hurt that bad, right? Telling a young person, a child from a very young age, how not to feel sadness, how not to cry. And for me, as a very sensitive child, especially, it was something that I was ridiculed about my entire life.
Me too.
And also something that I think people would be like, oh, you know, May Bird and Carlson about my grandparents, y'all are spoiling her. And
because you were sensitive.
Because they let me fucking cry when I was sad. So there definitely have been a lot of negative messages around, you know, feeling grief to its fullest depth. And I think what was complicated for me in this season 2M is because I kept thinking to myself, I don't have no fucking PTO. I can't just call out of work. And so there are those people who are listening who feel so burdened by day to day, just life, until I think that also gets in the way of us truly being able to rest in challenging circumstances and struggles.
I'm struck by two things you said, and one is the idea of like an appropriate response and being told how not to feel from such a young age. And I think the whole idea of like what is appropriate is a societal construct that really has very, very bad impacts on children in particular, but also adults, right? Like, how do you dress? How do you look? How do you sit? How do you talk? How do you, and that like kind of spins into seasons of challenge, and you're like supposed to be a robot.
Yeah, exactly.
I think, you know, the other thing that we talked about is like this idea of, as you were a solopreneur, right, wanting to not share that you were struggling. And so to show up was like 10 times harder.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe it would have been more effective for you just to take a little bit of a break. And you didn't let yourself do that.
I did not. I think if I had it to do all over again, I would have just taken a step back. And as far as it concerns like this part of my business, being on camera, being public, I would have just went dark for a little while. And I think part of the fear is that if I did that and came back, no one would be here. And that's just not how community works. That's that negative self-talk that makes us deny our feelings and isolate ourselves. Of course, people would still be here. Of course, the brand would still be with the brand. The brand would brand regardless, right? Because I've done the work.
You paid into the piggy bank.
Absolutely. And so I am happy that I feel much stronger and much clearer on the breakup and navigating this new season. And one thing I haven't talked about on my own platform that you know personally that really helped me to get to the other side of it, and this is actually a joy-filled moment, is the connections that I had through going to group therapy. I did 6 weeks of group therapy. I did 3 times a week, either virtual or in person, out of my PhD need, but also my fear of falling apart. I felt like I needed to be held in a different type of way that individual therapy just couldn't do. And I'm so happy and blessed that I found it as a modality that was covered by insurance. So definitely a privilege there. But when I tell you immediately when I walked in the room and sat down and sobbed and told my story, I knew I was in the right place.
That's so amazing and so brave.
Thank you.
Because a lot of people are unable to access that or make that decision for themselves.
Yeah.
How did you know that that's something that would be helpful?
So my therapist recommended it after I had just gone through really like a specific moment of crisis. And I called her and I was like, I need to go somewhere. And you know how if you're struggling with a substance abuse disorder, you got rehab and like there's this understanding of kind of what to do, 12-step programs, the path to sobriety. I was like, my shit is off right now. Mentally, emotionally, I do not feel well. I know I don't need to be in an inpatient situation, but what's in between?
Mm-hmm.
And so it was her who guided me through the program. They're called two things, either PHP, partial hospitalization program, or I think the other name of it might be an ILP or something like that. I forget what that acronym stands for.
But you didn't stay overnight.
You don't stay overnight. And what it is meant to do is kind of bridge the gap between individual therapy and intense hospitalization. Because the goal is to keep people out of needing to be hospitalized because there is so much in between, right? There are people who go through treatment resistant depression. There are people who have gone through different types of assault and are living with PTSD, right? There are so many things that we deal with day to day that I think because of this post-industrial capitalist society, we tend to just tuck away and forget about, right? And so this type of program is meant to help you to really, it was also trauma-based, so we used a methodology called cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT. And so there are so many things that we can get to the root of if we just have the privilege of time, space, and give ourselves the privilege of dedication. And so I broke through some traumas, Margo, that I've had since I was a very little child in this space.
That's amazing. And thank you for sharing. I know you sharing that is going to help a lot of different people. Particularly, I think a lot of us, I can speak for myself, right, have been in therapy for a really long time, and it doesn't always do the trick.
Right. I have a question for you, though. So we both have had career changes post. For you, your BRCA diagnosis. For me, my breast cancer diagnosis. What do you think? Do you think that those things were necessary? Well, speak for you, I'll speak for myself, to get us to this point as far as living life differently and more on our own terms. Could you have done it without it? And if so, how?
So I wish I could say yes, but I don't think I could have. I don't think I could have because I was so committed to doing the right thing. And the right thing being what like other people expected of me, or like what was appropriate, like this word appropriate, or what was prudent and responsible. And all of these kind of concepts I had about my own identity, which were 100% wrapped up in my work. And when something, like with my experience, and very different and less traumatic than your medical experience, like just rocks you to your core, right, immediately, and changes kind of your whole perspective on your own physical well-being and your body and your longevity and, your for me, there's this very real, and we've talked about this on the podcast, right? This really very real risk. I don't even know how to describe it. Like there's a reality that my children have inherited this like toxic gene that I carry, and the responsibility associated with that. And it kind of just like brings you to your knees in this way. You're like, okay, I like gig is up.
Yeah.
Like, and that to me was really liberating. Like, I wish I hadn't needed that to be like, you know what, I need to do something different. I need a break. I want to do something on my own, or, challenge myself in different ways, or give myself some space. But for whatever reason, the universe knew that I needed a full stop.
Yeah, absolutely.
What do you think?
Same. For sure. Because I had Margo hired like a business coach and had done all this work to kind of build the brand, and things just weren't accelerating. I didn't feel like things were growing, right? Because I was going to this 9-to-5 that I didn't love. I felt like I was being underappreciated. I was navigating white dominant norms at work every day, microaggressions, all the things that many women and people of color experience at work. And I was just unhappy with my career and not willing to admit that to myself.
Oh, I felt that way as well.
So the cancer,
because people were telling you
that you should be grateful, that you should be happy. You're a lawyer.
Right. You're doing really good work. you're helping a lot of people.
Absolutely.
You're at a really good organization. Oh, you're working with this person. That
Very
person's really well
elite,
respected.
very prestigious. You know, you have this degree that's supposed to be this tremendous accolade, and you've gone to this institution that has all of the stuff behind it, the thing. And I just remember saying, I don't want this shit. I literally don't want any of this. And when I made it up in my mind psychologically that I was going to quit, I remember having a moment where I was like, oh, this is why certain parts of this job that I was doing have always been so hard for me. Because I don't care about this shit.
That's exactly my experience too. Once I made the decision, it was done.
Yeah. And I'm sure like very eye-opening. Like it made you see all parts of your
like all of
career
the things
differently.
that I was so right. It's like, right, I didn't like XYZ of higher ed or academia.
Yeah.
I never fit in. I never wanted to do this. I don't miss this.
Yes.
I miss some things, sure, but I had a very like I couldn't imagine my work life without my old job.
Me too. Golden handcuffs are indeed real.
Except golden handcuffs in our situation weren't related to money
at all. I
think that's another thing that is kind of lost on kind of the conversation in our society around our obsession with work. In a post-industrial capitalistic society, it's like often about money and finances and people feeling stuck because they're making so much money, or they could make a lot of money, or they're on a trajectory to make a lot of money. And for sure, that's some people's experiences, and they're fucking miserable and don't know how to get out. And they're, the income earner for their family or whatever, have a lot of financial responsibilities that can't be replicated in another industry. But we don't often talk about that similar work ethic associated with like public interest, public service, government, right?
Absolutely.
And the like societal prestige or whatever that holds people captive in jobs that can really be very toxic.
Very toxic. And so you're not getting the bag. You're working long hours. Sometimes, very often, I think, because of the way these organizations are constructed, a path of like linear growth and career trajectory is not obvious in any way. It's so easy to just plateau. And, I think there is this idea that people think, well, we're a well-meaning or a mission-driven society. This is higher ed. This is government. We're doing civic service. We're doing something good that can really be just as toxic as any other kind of Fortune 500 company that has problematic labor practices.
Yeah. And actually, for me, in my like most recent position, I loved a lot of aspects of my job and have nothing but good feelings towards my position, but also can hold the space that it's not for me.
And it can be for other people.
It can be a great choice.
Yeah. So yes, we can have a whole conversation about work-life balance and what that means around joy. I do think it's important just to put a pin here because these are things that we learned about our joy and our connection to work as we were going through a very like challenging time in our lives, which is why we bring it up, right?
Yeah. Yes. And also how kind of joy associated with professional identity can also be harmful. And so I think we'll put a pin in that and definitely kind of continue talking about it because I know it's something that really kind of bubbles to the surface for a lot of people in big age. Absolutely. Always, but particularly as they're kind of moving along in their career in really, really profound ways, either as entrepreneurs or in big corporations and loving and hating and all of that. But kind of going back to some of these like incredible moments of joy and grief for you, Tashira, particularly in like, let's say the last 5 years, what's something you wish you had known that you know now that would have held you maybe more softly?
Speaking of softly, that joy and grief are not mine to navigate alone. The happiest moments, the saddest moments, the mundane, everything in between, I think my orientation, both spiritually and culturally, those moments are meant to be shared. with people who love you, because people want to stand in the gap. And so what I wish I would have known is that my work was to let people love me. And my friend Joel, who is an amazingly brilliant poet, told me during the breakup, he was like, you go through the pain alone, you heal in community. And I wish I would have known to give myself the grace and the space to heal in community in all ways.
That's really, really beautiful. I think two things. One of the things that you said really has resonated with me, and that's allowing people in the ways that they know best or that feel most familiar to them. I found an immense amount of comfort over the last couple of weeks in people telling me that they're praying for me and my family. Even though I am not a religious person myself, I found so much comfort in that because I know it's something that is of value and importance to people I love. And I wish I had let that in earlier. That's one thing. The other is something that I'm is like a work in progress for me. And it's something that I wish I had known, and I wish I really know, although trying to be totally truthful, I don't fully hold it yet, but I'm working towards it. And that's giving myself permission to feel without feeling guilt. Feel whatever I'm feeling. And so one of the things that I'm really working on is trying not to feel guilt around any feeling that I have. And just like the work of breath and awareness that I've done, just being aware of the feeling and allowing it in and allowing it out, and without feeling guilt. And so one of the deep feelings I've had over the last couple of weeks is this really intense desire to be alone, which I felt a lot of guilt about because I'm very rarely alone. And I feel guilty about wanting to be alone because I should not want to be alone during a period of hardship. I should want to be with my family and in community. And that's not always how I felt. And I feel a lot of guilt around that. And, I think particularly we've talked about this around parenting and not wanting always to be with my children as I navigate some of my fear and grief around my dad, and feeling like a bad parent and feeling like a bad partner and all the things associated, a bad worker, blah, 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 blah. And trying to kind of let go of that and just being like, my heart is telling me to be alone right now. That's what I need.
I'm so proud of you for saying that, because I think it's going to touch people in more ways than you probably know. You just gave someone permission to recognize the same thing about themselves and to be able to say it out loud. So thank you.
Thank you.
So what is one thing you're going to do for yourself, my friend, today?
I am hosting a party tonight, and I'm really excited to share a dinner and community.
That's amazing.
What about you?
I am looking forward to sitting at the bar at the airport and having a delicious cocktail while I work on my laptop. There's something about a cocktail at the airport that always tastes a little better to me. I'm not sure why.
No, I know what it is. It's the excitement about travel, even when you're traveling home.
That's what it is.
I feel it around. I mean, I don't usually drink alcohol before flights, but I feel it around food.
Okay.
And you get to the airport, you're early. I'm just going to get a coffee and work on my laptop or read my book, or it's the anticipation. I don't know. And it's also you've made it.
Yes. Yes.
Also for you who miss so many flights, the fact that you're going to get there in time to have a cocktail and work feels really organized.
A huge accomplishment for today. And I'm looking forward to it.
I'm looking forward to it too.
Thank you for an amazing episode, friends.
Thank you. I'm really
Thanks
excited.
for listening, y'all.